What would you do if you found out your partner was cheating on you? Or maybe, if we're being honest, you felt that pull yourself. Either way, the word infidelity hits hard. Anger, betrayal, guilt, shame. But wait, why do people cheat in the first place? Is it really just because they're selfish or cruel? Or is there something deeper going on inside the human mind? Today, we're going to step inside the psychology of cheating. Not to excuse it, not to judge it, but to understand the darker impulses that almost nobody wants to talk about. And the truth is, this is a lot more common than most people think. Some studies suggest that around 20 to 40% of married people admit to cheating at least once. The exact number changes depending on the survey and the culture. But one thing is clear. This is not just a problem for a tiny group of bad people. This is a human problem. So why do seemingly ordinary people cross that line? One of the biggest myths is that cheating is mostly about sex. But when therapists and researchers actually look at real cases, the story is usually much more complicated. One of the biggest psychological drivers is low self-worth. Take this example. A middle-aged man had been working the same job for 15 years. He'd been passed over for promotions more than once. At home, he felt invisible. Like his wife and kids didn't really respect him anymore. Then one day, a younger coworker started asking for his advice. She listened closely. She praised his experience. And for the first time in a long time, he felt important. He felt seen. That feeling was powerful enough to pull him into an affair. For him, it wasn't mainly about sex. It was about feeling valuable again. Psychologists sometimes describe this as self-esteem repair. A lot of people who cheat aren't just dissatisfied with their relationship. They're dissatisfied with themselves. And the attention they get from someone new can feel like a drug. For a moment, it numbs the pain. For a moment, it makes them feel whole. Another major reason is emotional disconnection. You've probably heard the stereotype that men cheat for sex and women cheat for emotional reasons. That's too simple, but it does point to something real. A lot of women who cheat describe feeling emotionally alone long before anything physical happens. Imagine a stay-at-home mom whose husband is always working. When he gets home, their conversations are only about bills, schedules, and the kids. No real connection, no emotional warmth, just logistics. Then she reconnects with an old friend. At first, it's just talking. Just messages. Just someone asking how she's really doing. And suddenly, she feels understood. She feels heard. She feels like a person again. That emotional connection grows. Then the boundary starts to blur. An emotional affair becomes a physical one. In cases like this, cheating isn't just reckless desire. It's often a desperate attempt to fill an emotional void. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. For some people, the biggest attraction isn't the person. It's the thrill, the secrecy, the risk, the fact that it's forbidden. Psychology sometimes calls this the forbidden fruit effect. And honestly, it can be incredibly powerful. Sneaking around, sharing a secret no one else knows, getting away with something dangerous. That can create a rush of adrenaline and dopamine that feels almost addictive. Some thrill-seeking cheaters aren't even deeply unhappy in their relationship. Their life may be stable. Their partner may be loving. But stability starts to feel boring. And they chase intensity instead. They want the high. The problem is, once the affair becomes predictable, or gets exposed, the excitement fades. And then they start looking for the next spark. So what happens inside the mind of someone who's cheating? How do they live with it? One of the most common defense mechanisms is rationalization. In simple terms, that's when people make up reasons to justify behavior they know is wrong. They tell themselves things like, my partner stopped caring first. Our relationship is basically over anyway. This isn't serious. It's just fun. Psychologists link this to cognitive dissonance. That uncomfortable mental tension you feel when your actions don't match your values. Most people want to believe they're decent. So when they do something that clashes with that self-image, their brain starts rewriting the story. Not to tell the truth, but to reduce the guilt. There's another pattern that's just as fascinating. It's called compartmentalization. That's when people mentally split different parts of themselves into separate boxes. At work, they may be a loyal spouse, a responsible parent, a respected professional. In the affair, they become someone else entirely. By separating those identities, they avoid feeling the full weight of what they're doing. They tell themselves, this isn't the real me. This is temporary. This doesn't define me. But that split usually doesn't last. Eventually, reality catches up. And when it does, the guilt, confusion, and emotional crash can be brutal. Now let's talk about patterns. Not every person who cheats does it for the same reason. Human beings are way too complex for neat little boxes. But psychologists have noticed a few recurring types. First, there's the opportunistic type. These people don't always plan to cheat. They get caught in the moment. Maybe it's too much to drink. Maybe it's a work trip. Maybe it's a random connection that goes too far. It happens impulsively, and afterward, they often do feel real regret. But by then, the damage is already done. Second, there's the emotionally deprived type. These are people who look outside the relationship for what they can't find inside it. Maybe a wife feels dismissed at home and becomes attached to someone who makes her feel appreciated. Maybe a husband feels constantly criticized and gets drawn to someone who feels gentle and safe. This type often develops intense emotional dependence on the other person. And the deeper the bond gets, the messier everything becomes. Third, there's the chronic type. These are the repeat cheaters. The ones who keep chasing new people over and over again. For them, cheating starts to look a lot like an addiction. Not necessarily to sex itself, but to novelty, validation, and the emotional high of the beginning. They crave that first rush, that intensity, that fantasy, and once a relationship becomes stable, they lose interest. Then they move on and do it again. In many cases, this pattern goes all the way back to attachment issues. Attachment theory is the idea that our earliest relationships shape how safe or unsafe love feels later in life. People with unstable attachment often struggle to stay grounded in secure, steady intimacy. They may want closeness deeply, but also feel restless inside it. And that's where things get really important. Cheating is not always caused by a bad relationship. Sometimes the marriage looks fine from the outside. The family seems happy. The partner isn't abusive, cold, or neglectful. And yet the affair still happens. Why? Because sometimes the real conflict isn't in the relationship. It's inside the person. Recent psychology research suggests that cheating can also be tied to inner crisis. A fear of aging, a fear of death, a sense that life has become flat, repetitive, or empty. What some people call a midlife crisis is often really an identity crisis. They don't just want a new partner. They want a new version of themselves. And an affair can feel like a shortcut to that transformation. It can make them feel young again, desired again, alive again. In that sense, cheating may not just be an act of betrayal. It may be a reckless attempt at self-reinvention. Now let's zoom out even further. Modern life itself may be making all of this easier. 20 years ago, starting an affair took effort. You had to make plans, find private time, create excuses, take real risks just to stay in contact. Now, all it takes is a phone, a chat app, a late-night message. Social media has created what some psychologists call an explosion of opportunity. There are more doors open than ever before. More temptations, more secrecy, more access, and that means self-control is being tested in ways previous generations never had to deal with at this scale. So what does cheating actually feel like for the person doing it? At first, it's often pure excitement. The rush of someone new, the thrill of secrecy, the fantasy of being chosen again. At this stage, dopamine is firing hard. People can act like teenagers in first love. Everything feels electric. But that doesn't last. Soon, more complicated emotions start to creep in. Anxiety, guilt, fear, the constant stress of getting caught. People living double lives often carry enormous mental pressure. They have to remember their lies, delete messages, hide their tracks, manage their time, stay emotionally available to two different realities at once. And that kind of strain builds up fast. Eventually, it starts poisoning everything. Their sleep, their mood, their focus, their original relationship, sometimes even the affair itself. What's especially striking is that many people who cheat feel deep shame while still struggling to stop. That contradiction sounds strange, but it's very real. Part of the reason may be brain chemistry. When something gives you a strong emotional reward, Your brain starts chasing it again. Even when you know it's harmful. Even when it's blowing up your life. In that way, infidelity can start to resemble a loop. Not just a moral failure, but a psychological trap. None of this makes cheating harmless. It doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't take away the betrayal. The pain is real. And for the person who was cheated on, that wound can cut incredibly deep. But if we only reduce cheating to bad people doing bad things, we miss the bigger truth. Human behavior is rarely that simple. Infidelity can reveal loneliness, insecurity, unhealed wounds, thrill-seeking, emotional hunger, fear of aging, fear of being ordinary, fear of being unseen, and maybe that's the part that makes this topic so uncomfortable. Because if we look closely enough, we don't just see them. We see something human, something fragile, something frighteningly familiar. In the end, understanding cheating doesn't mean approving of it. It means being honest about how complicated love, desire, and weakness really are. No relationship is perfect. No person is perfect. What matters is whether we're willing to face ourselves clearly, to understand the pain we cause, to own what we do, and to choose better before damage becomes destiny. Because in the end, the most dangerous lies are not the ones we tell other people. They're the ones we tell ourselves.